Hello. In this video, I'll be showing you how to set up a Git-based workflow for your FiveM server resources. And for that, I'll be using this tool that I've built called fivem-subrepo. This will create a repository and all of the resource repositories as well for you using a txadmin recipe. Um, if you want, you could follow all of these instructions that are given in the README and you'll be able to set it up. But I will be showing you how to do that in this video as well. So if you want to follow, you can. For this, you're going to need either a Linux machine where you will have your main repository cloned, um, or you could use WSL on Windows as well. That works fine. In order to do everything using this tool, you will first need to do a couple of steps. These are only one-time steps that you need to follow, and those are, well, you'll need to install a bunch of tools, which are JQ, YQ, and all of those, and you could just run these set of commands, and it'll set up everything for you. Once all of the prerequisites are done, you could check if they are available on your machine or not. I can quickly check by going to my instance. This is the one that I'm going to be using, and I could just run those commands and see if there's any output. For example, here JQ is working, YQ is working, GH works, um, unzip works, and then git subrepo works, and there was another one called well, git. So I have all of the commands already working. So once you have the follow these instructions, you'll be able to have all of the prerequisites met. The next step is to create a new organization. I have already done that, but it's pretty standard. You go to GitHub and then you could just create a new one. So I can show you. So you could just come here, go to, well, add new organization and just follow the steps after clicking free. And you'll have an organization. And this is recommended because if you don't create a new organization and you're using your personal account or you're using like an existing one, and if you have like a lot of repositories, there could be name conflicts because of the way this tool works. So I wouldn't be responsible if you don't get it to work. So you will need either a new organization or an existing one which doesn't have any repositories with any QB-core resource names. So like you shouldn't be having like QB-core repository inside of your organization, for example. So if you don't have any of these repositories, you can use an existing one. So for the purposes of this demo, I have created one and I can go to it by just going here and typing it out. So this is the one that I've created. It's called Elenium Test 1. I'll be using that. So once you have created the organization, you're going to need to set up a few things on the CLI. So let's jump to the CLI and I will do all of those steps and then you can follow those as well if you want. So the first thing that you'll need is to set up your Git, and the way you set it up is basically you just need to set up like the username and email. So you could run git config global user.name and then your username for Git. I have this, so I've set that. And then you'll need to set up your email. And for this, I will be using a protected email, but you could use your own if you wanted to. So once you have done that, You then need to configure GH, which is the GitHub CLI. And for that, first you will need a GitHub token, and the GitHub token and instructions on how to get those are there in the README. So you could go to github.com, follow these instructions, and at the end you will have your token with you. Copy the token. I'll copy mine. Once you've copied the token, you're gonna run these commands to set up GH properly. So you're gonna say echo the token and then gh auth login. This will set up GH, and if you want to see if it's working, you can run gh auth status, and you can see that it was able to log in. There's a green tick, so this is working fine. The next thing is to set up authentication for cloning the repos. This is done by setting your Git token when making requests. So you could do this. So you could export a variable called myGetToken, paste the token here. I'm gonna copy it again, paste it, and then just run this command. Again, all of these commands and things that I'm doing, I'm just following the README. So if you're stuck or if you don't know where to get these commands from or the instructions, everything is in the README for the repository. So now at this point, I should have everything configured in terms of the CLI tools. Now the next step is to clone that subrepo or the tool that I've created. To do that, I'll just copy the clone command and I'll do an ls so I can see that there's a folder called fivem-subrepo in my machine now. I can cd to the repo and then I can see that there's a bunch of things there. So before starting this process, what you need to do is you're going to need to configure your environment. And you could do that by editing the env.sh file. You could, if you are running this in WSL and you have like VS Code installed, you could just open it up in VS Code by typing code env.sh or just code dot to open up the whole folder. I'm gonna use a terminal-based editor called VI. So here you're gonna need to configure four things. Well, mainly three, but it's up to you. So the org name is the name of the organization that you created in the previous section. So in this case, mine was called Selenium Test 1. The repo name is basically what you want to name your main repository. So for me, I'll just say FiveM Server resources. That sounds about right. And repo path will be an absolute path of where my repositories will be cloned, like the main one and all of the resources and where everything will be. So I'll just uh, pass in home and then maybe FiveM. So this is where I want everything to be. And then the recipe path will be, uh, if you are using Core, you don't need to change that. But if you're using a custom recipe, you'd want to specify a path to your custom recipe. Once you're done with this, you'll save this. After saving, you just need to do /fivem-subrepo and create. This will start to create all of the repositories and it will all be done in runtime. So if I go back here, previously there were no repositories, but if I refresh, they should start to flow in. Or actually, yes, there won't be public repositories, they will be private. So if I log in, you're gonna see that the repositories are popping up. So we have FiveM Server resources, we have the all of the resource repositories that are being created. This is still running. There's a lot of things that are going on at the moment. This is going to take some time because it will create not just clones, but something called private forks. This will allow you to track the upstream repositories as well without having you to create a public repository, although it will not show you here that this is a fork, but this actually is a fork technically. So yes, it's at 10 now, and the main FiveM server resources, if you open this up, you can see that it has like your own standard stuff, like you have a server.cfg and then you have your resources folder, and this is being populated as we speak. Okay, now that you see that this is done, if I jump back to this organization, you can see that it has 82 repositories now. And this FiveM server resources have like all of the resources the way it should have, and all of the individual ones as well. So you don't need to worry about any of the individual ones. You only care about the main one. That's the main purpose, but these need to be there in order to track the remote repositories. So now if I go back to like my folder where I had cloned all of them, or where this tool cloned all of them, it should have been here. So you could see that there's like all of these repositories, they have been cloned here as well. And the one that I'm interested in this one. So imagine you'd have a server um, running somewhere. Maybe it's Windows, maybe it's Linux, whatever that is. What you will do is basically you will only clone this FiveM server resources repository on your actual FiveM server virtual machine, or like whatever you call it, like VPS or dedicated server, whatever that is. Once you've cloned it, and this is your machine where you want to like make changes, like let's say this is your local machine. For example, if I were to make changes to, let's say, let's go to QB and then QB core. So it has a shared config file, which I want to modify. It should be config.lua. So this is the config.lua. Let's say I want the starting cache to be 10,000 instead of 5,000. And then maybe I also want to increase the player slots or inventory slots to like 50 or something. And I want to group the notifications. And yeah, that's it. So I made changes to this QB core file. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to like my root folder, which is the repository name here. And if I run git status, you can see that it's telling me that I have modified QB core, which is what I did. So now what you have to do is, let's say you want to push this change to the server and of course to the actual repository for QB core. Uh, what you want to do is you want to add the file. So you'll say git add this file, and then you'll create a commit message saying um, modified inventory slots and starting bank balance. So this is how you normally commit, but instead of pushing it to this repository directly, what you have to do is you have to specify which resource you actually changed. So this is where it's a bit different than in traditional repository. So every time you make a change, you have to say, okay, I made change in Cubicore repository. Please push that change. And the way it works is basically you'll say git subrepo push after committing, of course, and then paste in the whole directory until the resource name and press enter. It's gonna take a few seconds, and you see that it says resource Cubicore pushed to Cubicore, which means if I go to my organization, press refresh, go to Cubicore repository, I can see that the change that I pushed from my main repository is now in my private repository as well. So it automatically keeps track and pushes the change to the respective repository. And once that is done, you also need to do a normal push just so that your main repository also has those changes. And if I come back here, press refresh, go to FiveM Server resources, and see all of my commits, I can see that my commit is there as well. So this is just an extra step that you need to do. But what you can do is, of course, if you're making changes to a lot of files and you want to commit all of them, you you sh I mean, it's kind of hard to like do copy this and then paste it for every sub-repository that you've changed. Instead of this, what you can do is you could just say git subrepo push minus minus all. This will automatically detect any changes in any resource repositories, and it will push them as well. The only downside is that this takes some time. So if you just made change to like a single file in a single repository, you could just paste in the uh, the resource name with its full path, and it will take care of the rest. So you can see that it's gonna go through each and every repository, and it'll say if if it had any new commits that you've made, it will show it here. Otherwise, it'll just say it has no commits to push. So I'm not gonna wait for this command to finish, but this is how you push those changes. And then another thing is, of course, this is how you delegate the changes and you push them to all of the child repositories, I guess, or sub repos. How do you pull all of the upstream changes? And that's also pretty simple. But instead of, I mean, the way to do it is you need to go back to the fivem-subrepo directory, which is the tool that I made, in order to run that command instead of from the FiveM server or your resource folder. So I'm just gonna go there and then I'll say fivem-subrepo pull. And what this will do is it'll throw me a bunch of errors. What the hell? Yep. So I guess it's because I haven't made changes to the recipe. So what I want is to skip all of these, the one that have like skip true. So once you have skipped all of them, you can then run the command fivem-subrepo pull. And yes, so this will go through again all of the repositories and it will see if the upstream had any changes. And if it does, it will perform like a two-step process. So what it will do is it will first pull the changes into the sub repository. Let's say if it was QB core, it will pull the changes to QB core repository, and then it will update the main repository as well so that everything is tracked properly. So I'm again gonna wait for this to finish. Okay, so you can see that it updated everything. Again, right now we uh, tried to fetch everything again in a matter of minutes. So since we already had everything latest, it didn't do anything, but it checked all of the repositories to see if there were any updates. So the next thing that I'll show you is how to add new resources. And it's pretty simple. All you have to do is add it to your recipe. So I'm gonna go to the end of this recipe and then I'm gonna add a new one. I'll say, so I will add PS dispatch and I want to store it in, maybe I'll just call it custom or project slot PS and then PS dispatch, and the branch is main. Here, I'll show you what I'm adding. So this is a repository. I'll just copy the URL. I saw that the branch is main, and then the source would be the repository. And I added it, I saved the file. Now all I have to do is I need to do fivem-subrepo create, and it will create the repositories that I just added. Oh, and this is because it skipped the other repositories that already existed, and there's like a wait because of GitHub throttling. So that's why you see this. But if you want, you could just remove the wait that you have in TX admin recipe, and this won't be there anymore. It will be pretty quick. So it created a new repo, it cloned it, it added it to the main repo, it did everything. So now if I come back here, I refresh, I can see that inside of resources, I have my PS folder, and inside of PS, I have PS dispatch. Of course, you need to still add it to server.cfg, but that's pretty simple. And you also have PS dispatch as a private fork. And that's how easy it is to set up more resources using this method. I hope you liked this video. Thank you.